Jesus, it's more than a song, but it depends on what that song is. If that song is you, Jesus, the song of your life, the song that our Heavenly Father is singing to us, and you're that song, then it's not more than a song. You are that beauty, you are that loveliness, you are that joy, you are that song. And Jesus, let us be that song, let us be your song, expressed beautifully, lovely, in new ways through us, the song of love. Help us, dear Lord, to be open to that beautiful song and how we can make that song even better because it'll be coming from us to you. Thank you, Jesus, for letting us be your song. Amen. Okay, let's see what that good news song is. The evangelization of joy, the gospel of joy, the social dimension, the common good, and peace in society. We're spinning around on the Pope Francis's letter, dancing around and singing along, allowing Jesus' joy to be our life. Allowing Jesus' joy to be our life. Does that sound impossible? Well, if it wasn't for Jesus, it would be. But he's got nothing else to do but to light us up. The gospel of joy, not just coming out in words, but in everything about who we are and how we are and what we do, every part of the social fabric, our laws, our politics, our sharing, our institutions, our learnings, everything, the gospel, the good news, the joy wants to come up inside of everything. Light us all up. The social dimension, progress in building a people of peace. Remember we said that peace is not just an absence of violence, it's not just suppressing other people's hostility. Peace is this right relationship with God so that God's goodness can come up inside of everybody all together, all at once. Right relationships with each other, right relationships with God. You cannot have true peace without right relationships. That means justice. Justice is right relationships with each other, right relationships with God. And when you have right relationships, then God can flow through, and you'll have a living peace, an alive peace. Not just a suppression, not just holding down things. That's not peace. Peace should be the lifting up who we are. The shalom of God, who we are, God's people, God's glorious ones, his beloved ones, living. And we need to have right relationships in what we do, how we work, how we share, how we respect each other. Everything has to have that right relationship. Justice equals right relationships. Right relationships, justice, and then peace can flourish. Justice and peace should kiss. Justice is right relationships, and then how it looks and how it lives is peace, God's peace. Right relationships, life flowing through us, life being shared. Right relationships, peace. Justice and peace shall kiss. What psalm was that? 85, 86? Something like that, pretty close. Okay. Building a people of peace, justice, and fraternity depends on 4 principles related to constant tensions present in every social reality. These derive from the pillars of the Church's social doctrine, which serve as primary and fundamental parameters of reference for interpreting and evaluating social phenomena. So the Church has reality checks. So he says, you think you're talking about peace and justice? Let's do a reality check. Let's pull out our little measuring stick and see, and is this real or are you hallucinating? So these are 4 little principles evaluating social justice. In their light, these 4 principles, I would like now to set forth these 4 specific principles which can guide the development of life in society and the building of a people where differences are harmonized within a shared pursuit. Differences are harmonized within a shared pursuit. We're in this together. Shared pursuit. I do so out of the conviction that their application can be a genuine path to peace within each nation and the entire world. A living peace, not just a suppression, a living peace of right relationships. Okay. A constant tension exists between fullness and limitation. Fullness evokes the desire for complete possession, while limitation is a wall set before us. Broadly speaking, time has to do with the fullness as an expression of the horizon which constantly opens before us, while each individual moment has to do with the limitation as an expression of enclosure. So he says, in the here and the now, there are certain realities that we're working with. He says we have a longing for this fullness, but how it gets brought about, the growing path, is what we're looking for. Okay. People live poised between each individual moment and the greater, brighter horizon of the utopian future as the final cause which draws us to itself. So we're being drawn toward a fullness of completion. We're being moved, we're emerging toward a horizon of more and more fulfillment. And in the meantime, we're on the way, those individual moments. So we want it all. We know where we have a sense of a joy, of a happiness, of a goodness. But in the meantime, how are we living with the ways and means to get there? Okay. Brighter horizon of the utopian future as the final cause which draws us to itself. Here we see a first principle for progress in building a people. Time is greater than space. Time means that we're moving toward the horizon. We have just a little bit of event that we're working on, but we know in that time, as it fulfills, there's going to be a complete fulfillment of everything. We're caught in our little piece, our little corner, but we know eventually that time will open up and open up and open up. I'm in a little corner of my own little spot. You're in a little corner of your own little spot. Someone else has their own little corner of our spots. We would tend to get territorial and protective. But we say, hang on a second. Let's coordinate, let's harmonize between our own little spots, and we're moving forward in a time sequences which involves all of us together. Our time is shared, our space is in different little corners. Your little group, my little group, somebody else's little group. We can tend to get protective and defensive about that, but then we notice we're all in the same place, moving through under the same sky, moving through under the same time zone. We're moving toward a fulfillment together. So it's keeping in mind that we have a broader horizon than just what we notice in our individual little cages, silos. Okay. This principle enables us to work slowly but surely without being obsessed with immediate results. It helps us patiently to endure difficult and adverse situations or inevitable changes in our plans. It invites us to accept the tension between fullness and limitation and to give a priority to time. It's basically a little bit of patience. So we keep our values intact, and rather than grabbing on to something in an individual, protective, self-centered way, we says, no, we're going to be sharing in this venture. We're going to patiently move toward this in a shared horizon. Okay. One of the faults which we occasionally observe in social political activity is that spaces and power are preferred to time and processes. Giving priority to space means madly attempting to keep everything together in the present, trying to possess all the spaces of power and of self-assertion. It is to crystallize processes and to presume to hold them back. Okay, keep rolling. Giving priority to time means being concerned about initiating processes rather than possessing spaces. Time governs spaces, illumines them, and makes them links in a constantly expanding chain with no possibility of return. What we need then is to give priority to actions which generate new processes in society and engage other persons and groups. One way of thinking of the space centering is clenching and gripping and grabbing. That's the space deal. Or as the little kids might say, mine. That's a basic space orientation. It's mine. So that's that clenching, grabbing, gripping. And even inside we can feel that. We can do that with people. This one is mine. That possessive clenching. And it's just a tendency. That movement isn't itself bad, but we just have to keep it in the perspective of the other dimension, which is we're going to work toward a fulfillment, and we're working with processes. We initiate, we try other ways in order to include each other, basically a little bit of common good. Instead of mine, power and influence is what I can control, what I can grip and clench, as opposed to our, and we're moving forward on a continuum together, optimizing the different needs and our relationships. Little common good action. Okay. Who can develop them to the point where they bear fruit in significant historical events without anxiety, but with clear convictions and tenacity? So our first principle is time versus space, and it's basically a self-oriented territorial orientation as opposed to moving on a continuum, moving with common values and common goals, and moving forward in processes together. Becoming of one accord. You move in accord, and you're moving forward on a spectrum together, moving in time, cooperating together. Okay. Sometimes I wonder if there are people in today's world who are really concerned about generating processes of people building as opposed to obtaining immediate results which yield easy, quick, short-term political gains but do not enhance human fullness. So the Pope is wondering about that. He's sitting there saying, is there anybody out there who really cares? Okay. History will perhaps judge the latter with the criterion set forth by Romano Guardini. The only measure for properly evaluating an age is to ask to what extent it fosters the development and attainment of a full and authentically meaningful human existence, in accordance with the peculiar character and the capacities of that age. So rather than optimizing people who are going after their short-term self-interest, shallow, quick, fast self-interests, so he says, how about if we consider that we share some aspects as humans, and as humans we're moving forward to a greater fulfillment of the whole humans, not just immediate, quick self-interests, but what is a more full development, what are some deeper values of humanity, and we need to move these along together and to move in a common way to affect these. Okay? This criterion also applies to evangelization, which calls for attention to the bigger picture, openness to suitable processes, and concern for the long run. The Lord himself, during his earthly life, often warned his disciples that there were things they could not yet understand and that they would have to await the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit, he says, if all the truth were laid bare all at once, everything all at once, it says that nobody could handle that. It would just be, whoa. says, so the Spirit stretches things out in time. It says, well, yeah, we're going to do something now, and we're going to move for a week and a month, and how about the next generation? And you know what? There might even be a generation after that. So let's take the bigger perspective as this, the human condition involves just me and my little week, month, year, family, interests, clan. Maybe it goes a little bit past that to the succeeding generation, and maybe it extends with the other people who may not happen to be in my same little camp. They might be fellow humans. Fellow humans. They might not even be Americans, but they're still fellow humans. So the Pope is trying to get us to get our picture into a shared humanity moving toward a common fulfillment. Doesn't mean that we have to hurt ourselves or damage ourselves. It just says as we move forward to our values, we keep in mind that these are shared values with some others, and we don't want to expect that me and my few years of my existence is everything. It keeps going and extends to others. It's come from people from before. It will include people come after. It includes people to my far left and my far right, above and below. We have this shared humanness. And we're cooperating to develop this fullness together. So the Holy Spirit is like a time release capsule. It calls us to the goodness, but it's not going to be a full release all at once, an explosion of goodness all in one moment. The Holy Spirit is a time release sense of goodness. Yes, we strive for goodness and we're empowered with goodness, but it's not all one quick blast of goodness. It's an extended goodness which moves us in a commitment in processes which move. We go somewhere together. It puts us in a better position to move together again. It puts us in a better condition to move forward again in this longitudinal way, this moving together in this common fulfillment. Okay. The parable of the weeds and the wheat graphically illustrates an important aspect of evangelization. The enemy can intrude upon the kingdom and so harm, but ultimately he is defeated by the goodness of the wheat. So part of the patient approach is when there is little problems in the middle, we know that there is a goodness which is even greater than the problems that we have amongst us. So we don't get so overwhelmed by our problems that we go thrashing about, anxiously dealing with our problems and being so violent at taking care of our problems that we disturb the goodness and the substances of how we are as human beings. Oh, there's one guy that has a tattoo. There's one person, and we go crazy over the one little thing, and it could do violence to the greater life that we have to fulfill together. So we don't minimize the fact that there are little troubles amongst us, but we want to put them in perspective of the greater good and the long development of the good. Just like a parent. If a parent says, oh, my kid did this, it's the worst kid in the world. It's a kid. These are a developmental thing that for a 4-year-old, this is normal. This is what 4-year-olds do. He's not the world's worst kid ever. It's a 4-year-old doing what 4-year-olds do, and we need to give him some attention. We need to help to shape him. We need to work it through, but we don't let the correction be so traumatic and violent that it tears the little kid up, tears us up, and creates this whole extra amount of bruising and drama. So the good is much greater, and we use the good to put in context how we proceed to make the corrections and deal with the weeds that are among the wheat. Okay. Conflict cannot be ignored or concealed. It has to be faced. But if we remain trapped in conflict, we lose our perspective, our horizons shrink, and reality itself begins to fall apart. In the midst of conflict, we lose our sense of the profundity, the profound unity of reality. So according to the Gospel of Caesar Milan, the dog whisperer, what he recommends when you deal with little animals who are misbehaving, his first principle of getting little animals, little dogs that are like barking and nipping and yapping and tearing off and tearing up the neighbor's bushes or whatever all those little wonderful creatures are doing, his first principle in correcting those dogs is to first get their owners to be calm. So according to this principle here, instead of going and thrashing about trying to correct one problem and creating another problem, all this disturbance going on, he says, somebody's got to start with a little bit of calm, a little bit of maturity, a little bit of peace, the profoundness of the goodness which exists. And you start with a sense of the wellness and the goodness and that sense of calm. And then in the sense of calm, then you can identify the little behavior that needs some adjusting. But if we're traumatized, the problem's going to be traumatized. We're going to add trauma to trauma, and we'll just go around, and we'll still be correcting that dog 30 years from now, if a dog lived 30 years. So that calmness, that sense of the deep sense of good, being rooted in the substance of the deep sense of God's goodness, the goodness in creation, the goodness, just take 1 second and then look outside and see one beautiful leaf on one tree. It says, whoa. That's just one beautiful leaf on one tree. And then you just look, oh, look at how much goodness, look at how much beauty, look at how much peace, look at how much substance of good order. And then in the perspective of all the goodness, then we take that perspective and we make the little adjustments from a sense of calm and peace and sureness and ease. Then we're not a panicked parent running after a kid. How could you do this? How could you do this? Adding trauma to trauma. And so this principle that Pope Francis is trying to get at is, let's get a sense of big boys and girls. There's a goodness, there's a wellness, there's an order, there's a love. We are wonderful, we are glorious, we are beautiful, we are awesome. And with that sense, that profound conviction of that goodness, then we approach a problem with a sense of goodness. But if something has gotten us all freaked out, then we have a sense of violence, addressing violence, and what's that going to lead to? More irritation, more trauma. So the gospel according to the dog whisperer, calm submission, relax, chill, get a sense of the calmness before anything else, before you even address the problem, to come to a sense of that well-being and wellness. In the Bible, that would be Psalm 131. My soul is stilled like a weaned child on its mother's lap. Like a weaned child. Not a child that's still nursing, not an anxious little baby that's still frustrated. Like a weaned child, stilled my soul on its mother's lap. Still, calm. Before the problem is answered, before the problem is solved, before we have the solution, begin that process with a calm and still soul. So that's what gets us a marker on the board. We don't start the game until we come there to the game with a calm soul. Come with a calm soul, and then we address the problems. But if we are not coming with a calm soul, and we're coming to solve problems, we're like the cat in the hat, trying to clean up the red with more red. And then there's more red, and we clean up the mess, making more mess, and we just keep going and going and going until the whole place has turned red. And we keep cleaning it up with more of that agitation. He says, no. The Lord blesses his loved ones while they rest. Psalm 127. The Lord blesses his loved ones while they rest. In vain do you get up early, putting off your going to sleep. In vain do you keep working and trying to solve the problems. It's vanity to keep solving the problems with more anxiety. You're just spreading the anxiety. Everything that you solve is spreading more anxiety. Then someone else is going to have to clean up all the anxiety that you've spread all throughout creation. So you have to get the last hat in the cat in the hat to start putting back all the red. You need somebody who can pick up and take care of all the anxiety that we're spreading around. It's much better to not spread the anxiety by solving our problems with worry. We lose our sense of the profound unity of reality. We lose our perspective, our horizons shrink, reality itself begins to fall apart. In the midst of conflict, we lose our sense of the profound unity of reality. So that's our starting place. The dog whisperer will not allow any owner to try and correct the dog if the owner is anxious. He says your pets are going to feel the electricity running right down through the leash. He says, don't pretend to be in control and tell them what to do if you are not in a sense of calm. So he says he trains the owners. That's obviously the bigger job. Our bigger job is to get in touch with inside where we're lacking that peace, lacking that calm. And then with that sense of calm, it doesn't cost anything. The calm doesn't cost anything. More times than anything else in the Bible, the Lord will say, do not be afraid. That means manage your fear. Chill. Calm submission. Manage your fear. Before anything else that the Lord will ask anybody to do, he first has to have that fear management. If you're operating on fear and you want to do something else while you're still afraid, he says this is not a starter. You can't start in fear. It's a non-starter. Do not be afraid first. No, I'll take care of something and then that will take care of my fear after I take care of the problem. Game over. Doesn't work. It seems like it should work. It seems like it ought to work. We try so hard. But what we're doing is we're spreading anxiety. Anxiety is not a form of prayer. Worry is not a form of prayer. Worry and anxiety are just the same thing, wearing different wardrobe. I'm going to dress my fear up as anxiety. I'm going to dress my fear up as worry. It's the same fear, just wearing different clothes today. I have my fear wearing a Hawaiian shirt. I'll have my fear wearing prayer words. It'll be worry. The Lord says, don't be afraid. Be calm. Trust. Don't be disturbed. And the Lord told that to all the best people, including Mary. The angel Gabriel told Mary, do not be disturbed. The angel Gabriel came to Joseph, don't be afraid. And everybody along the line. It's a requirement to cooperate with God's work of recreation, creating it according to the good plan that it's meant to be. That bigger good order, that profound unity of reality. there's a profound goodness to reality. There is a built-in goodness to reality, to you and to me. When God created, He says it's very good. It's good, it's very good. There's a profound goodness. Unless we start with that, how are we going to bring it back to that beautiful goodness if somehow we don't believe in the goodness itself? If we're not operating within that goodness, that calm is a sign of that goodness. Otherwise, we got goop all over our hands and we're going to go around cleaning things. You've got goop all over and then you're going to go around cleaning things. I'm going to go fix them up and then fix them up and fix them up. And it says, who in the world spread all this junk all over? You got tar over everything. Well, that was the people who were carrying it for you. They were making it better. Well, I wish they didn't make it so better. Okay, next one. When conflict arises, some people simply look at it and go their way as if nothing happened. They wash their hands of it and get on with their lives. Others embrace it in such a way that they become its prisoners. They lose their bearings, project onto institutions their own confusion and dissatisfaction, and make unity impossible. So he says when you got real objective situations out there, some people says, oh no, everything is all well in paradise, there are no problems. No, we just labeled it good shape. Doesn't look that good. So he says that doesn't really help. If you mislabel something, he says you have perfect health and we're never going to mind that you have pancreatic cancer. We're just going to label that good. Excuse me, doctor, pancreatic cancer, from what I can tell, is not a good thing. Yeah, but we'll just say it's good. No, it's not good. It's pancreatic cancer. Let's do something about it while we can. So on one side, he says just labeling it as all is well in paradise when you got a real conflict, he says that doesn't really help. So he says facing it, okay, but with a sense of calmness and goodness that you're facing the problem, rather than being so scared and so traumatized that now you got pancreatic cancer and you just tear up the whole school, the whole workplace, now you got pancreatic cancer and a huge Pandora's box of all this whirlwind of all this drama going on besides, so you can't even deal with anything. So that doesn't help either. The problem, okay, and the appropriate ways and the resources working together so that we can address it rather than getting a prisoner of the problem, so much so that you can't even effectively be with that problem. They lose their bearings, project onto institutions their own confusion and dissatisfaction, and thus make unity impossible. Okay. But there is also a third way, and it is the best way to deal with conflict. It is the willingness to face conflict head on, to resolve it, and to make it a link in the chain of a new process. Blessed are the peacemakers. So with that calmness, and with what is around us to address and to work on this together in a patient way with others, we make some little progress and others then can cooperate with us and add some more help to that. So we don't need to solve all the problems in our own little bubble. We're cooperating with others. We see the real problems, we move forward, and we realize that this is going to be part of the solution, and some more people are going to help us to get it even better as we progress together. Okay? In this way, it becomes possible to build communion amid disagreement. To build communion amid disagreement. But this can only be achieved by those great persons who are willing to go beyond the surface of the conflict and see others in their deepest dignity. This requires acknowledging a principle indispensable to the building of friendship in society, namely, that unity is greater than conflict. So the unity is underneath, so we know, even in a troubled situation, we have a sense of the deeper goodness underneath. So let's go back to the dog whisperer. He sees a little dog that's barking, barking, barking. And so the dog whisperer says, I can feel what it's like for that dog to be going through this. If I were a little dog like that and had this going on, I'd be just as scared. I can feel what it's like to be that scared little dog. So he can see the goodness of the dog, can feel that, and if you can feel something, you can put something yourself in somebody else's place, it shows that you are bigger than the problem. You need to be bigger than the problem in order to put yourself in the place of someone who has the problem. You need to be bigger than the problem in order to put yourself in the place of someone who's in that problem. So you need to be secure enough about who you are to have some compassion for somebody else who's in a situation. If you are not feeling secure, you cannot look at somebody else and give some kind of understanding. If you're insecure, if you're so insecure, you're going to be in conflict with them. You're just pushing and fighting, well, how about me, and how about me, and how about me, and they're taking away mine. You're not big enough, secure enough to say, let me just for a second experience what it's like for them to be in their situation. So you have such a big sense of unity, big sense of the big picture, big sense of the goodness going on, that you can just take a pause and say, I'm not saying what they're doing is good. I'm not saying if the dog is biting the couch or tearing up this is a good thing. But what I'm going to do is be big enough so I can say, I can see I can feel what that poor little dog is going on inside. I can see the frustration, I can feel that. And once we get big enough with a unity and a calmness that we can get a feeling of what that other person, what that other human is going through, we have a chance then of coming up with a solution to the conflict. So we have to get a sense of a unity which is bigger than the conflict. This is a good little doggy. This is a good neighbor. This is a good person who is having a big problem, how big their problem is. Whether they're a country who's having nuclear arms and they want to bomb somebody else, we have to be bigger than all of the problem, all of our fears, in order to say, what does it feel like for these people to be in this situation? What does it feel like for them to be in this situation? It says they're monsters, that means that we're not big enough to sense the unity which is bigger than conflict. And if we can't sense the unity which is bigger than the conflict, then we will not be able to move together. If we can't respect the dignity of the person, of the people, of the situation, which is bigger than whatever conflict it is. Jesus noticed that there was a conflict on earth. God noticed that there was a conflict on earth. Doesn't matter how big the conflict is. All the sins of the world of all times, that's a lot. All the sins of the world for all times, including all the social sins. Pollution, selfishness, whatever social sins are, all of them all together. God says, I have a perspective of no matter what all the people and all their selfishness have done, are doing, and are going to do all throughout human history, I got such a perspective on all that conflict, and I see the greater good. I can put that in a context of a greater good, that there is a unity underneath all of the conflict, so God can say, it's worth it for me to come and absorb all of the negativity, all the conflict, and say, it is worth saving because there's a greater good underneath all of the conflict. But if someone cannot say that there's a greater good underneath the conflict, they cannot have that perspective to come up with the well-being of a fulfillment. So we have to start it off by having a sense of calm, having a sense of the greater unity, and then in that way, then we can take the perspective and feel the different perspectives, and then with that perspective, be amazed what we can come up with as an approach where we can come through this together. But if I don't have a sense of empathy, if I don't have a sense of compassion, if I can't put myself in the perspective of what that person is going through and what they're like, the likelihood of a deep, profound peace coming out of this is not going to be too likely. We may hold each other off and repress each other, do stalemates in our conflict, but we're just holding our tensions, but we're not getting to a deeper sense of peace. To have a deeper sense of peace, we have to have this deeper sense of what the unity is, and then from there, we can have a sense of who this person is, what they're going through, and then come up with a greater resolve. And it may take a little while. Namely, that unity is greater than conflict. However, if we have fear operating in this, if we're upset and we're anxious and we're in the middle of this conflict with our fear and anxiousness and we're out there trying to solve each other's problems, that's not the recommended version. We have to get a sense of the unity greater than the conflict. And not just as an intellectual, that's got to get way down in an existential, phenomenological, anthropological reality. That's got to register completely. That's got to be who we are, where we're coming from. Okay. Solidarity, in its deepest and most challenging sense, thus becomes a way of making history in a life setting where conflicts, solidarity, in its deepest and most challenging sense, thus becomes a way of making history in a life setting where conflicts, tensions, and oppositions can achieve a diversified and life-giving unity. Solidarity, in its deepest and most challenging sense, that's to have this sense of a unity which is deeper than whatever the different ones are going through. That solidarity is underneath both of what we're going through, is a deep sense of the goodness of who we are, and we have something greater in common. We are part of a bigger picture together. We're part of a bigger history together. That's that solidarity that we need to be calm in order to get a sense of this greater unity of which we're both a part of. So tensions and oppositions can achieve a diversified and life-giving unity. This is not to operate kind of syncretism or for the absorption of one into the other, but rather for a resolution which takes place on a higher plane and preserves what is valid and useful on both sides. So rather than out of a fear or pressure or confusion, just jamming things together, hoping that putting them into some kind of blended solution is just going to make everybody come into right order. It says that might be based on fear and just pressures and pushing, and he says that may not come to a proper resolution of the real conflicts. Rather than resolving those problems, resolving those tensions, resolving those injustices, it's just jamming them together in another order and just holding them and packaging them as if that's an actual well situation. So Francis is recommending that a deeper, more comprehensive look of squarely looking at the real conflicts, but with a deep sense of unity, can help to combine a more comprehensive outcome rather than just throwing them together, trying to manage them and make them happen all of in a hurry, out of a sense of worry, impatience, and fear, rushing to a solution when in fact that might just be throwing more pressures, more conflict, and have it blow up in another way. Or just having injurious situations, putting communities together, jamming them together, pretending that it's going to go away, rather than coming up with what are the deeper prognosis, what's the deeper diagnosis of what the problems are. Okay. This principle drawn from the gospel reminds us that Christ has made all things one in himself. He's reconciled the world to himself. This is a big one. Christ has made all things one in himself, heaven and earth, God and man, time and eternity, flesh and spirit, person and society. The sign of this unity and reconciliation of all things in him is peace. Christ is our peace, Ephesians 2:14. The gospel message always begins with a greeting of peace, and peace at all times crowns and confirms the relations between the disciples. Okay, that's a mouthful. So the Pope is saying that the reason why Christ can come through and work out things in a substantial peace, rather than just throwing everybody together in a bunch of pressure and putting band-aids all around it, just hoping that it all goes away. He says Christ has reconciled all things in himself. Everything from God to humans to this person, all the problems, all the people, all of nature, all creation, all that stuff, all the stuff that's resolved, all the stuff that's unresolved, it all goes into one person, Jesus. And he says, boy, do I got a bellyache. I got all this stuff going on inside of me. Everybody who's conflicted in themselves against each other, conflicted against God, conflicted against themselves, conflicted against others, all these different conflicts. Jesus says, I am taking all the conflicts and I'm going to let them rip me up until I can reconcile them and have them come into right order within me. He says, it's going to kill me, but I'm going to do it. So he lets all the conflicting things occur within him, and it killed him. He says, I will take all the conflicting situations. I'll give you a little story of this. And this person couldn't do it because he's not Jesus. Jesus can do it because as a human, he takes all of the human community in his one human body, and the human community is conflicted, and so he feels the conflict, expresses the conflict, expresses it in his suffering and in his death, sucks up all the conflict and dies. However, God backs Jesus up and says, okay, Jesus, that was really good. As a human, you sucked up all the contradictions going on in the human family. All the fights, all the bickering, all the battles, you sucked them up into your one body, and it killed you because nobody can go through all of that self-fighting, which is what our human family is doing. It's fighting against itself. You showed the human community fighting against itself, fighting against God, and you showed what it's like, and it killed you. When you took all that self-violence into yourself, you showed what it looked like. You showed what humanity is doing to itself, and you showed what it looked like. It looked like that, and it killed you. But you sucked it all up. Every bit of it you took into your own body, and you sucked it all up. And you took it down into death. It got nailed through you, took it into death, and you didn't give back not even one little burp. You sucked it up and says, ha, gotcha, I got it, every single thing. It's like playing that game of hearts or whatever. You lose, and you get all of them together. You say, nope, I won. I got every single thing. I got it all. I took it in me, and I died with it. And I'm not going to give back one little bit of complaints or condemnations or bickering or whining or wimping or nothing. I just sucked it all up, and I took it out of the game. I took it out of nature. I took it out of the human family. I sucked it up, and guess what? I'm not going to give any of it back. Ha, ha, ha. So he reconciled everything in himself. And now he wants to give us a share in what he's reconciled in himself. He's the one who's reconciled in himself. The Heavenly Father says, okay, Jesus, really good, you did it good. You trusted me, you did it, you took all that contradiction into yourself and it killed you, but I'm going to back you up. I'll blow you back up into glory. I'll bring your humanity back to life with a glorious divinity, and says, you can kill a human, but you can't kill God. Jesus as a human died, and he took all that into his human nature, but he says, I'm also God. You forgot that one. I'm back. And I come back, and I'm showing you, this works. I want you guys to play the same game me, and I will give you my ability to do it. You don't have this ability to suck up all this stuff, because when you get a little bit, you build up and you become angry, you become bitter, you become disappointed, you get sick. When we take in all these energies, it twists us all around. We can't do it. So Jesus says, take some of my juice inside of you, because I can suck it up into divinity, and when you take some of me inside of you, it'll go inside of you, then it'll hit the divinity part, and it gets out of the equation. It gets out of the equation. Humanly, everything must balance. Everything in nature must balance. Everything must balance. You got this side of the equation, it has to, if you lose here, it's got to show up somewhere else. Every equation has to balance, unless in your equation you have a little divinity. If it gets a little bit divinity, it doesn't have to balance. God takes it out of the equation, and you don't have to have those laws of thermodynamics. You don't have to have a conservation of matter and energy. You don't have to have Einstein's equation of light and matter. Everything doesn't have to balance out. You don't have to have any equal signs. With God, you say, I can bring mercy, which means it doesn't have to play fair. I don't have to play the game. It doesn't have to justify, because I'm bringing in factors that are not part of the equation. I can come outside of the game of reality because I'm God. Jesus, being God, says, I can mess with reality, and I don't have to account for it. I don't have to say, it happened here and it happened over there. I can mess with reality. I can respect all the laws of nature, but I'm not limited to that. I can forgive in ways that humans can't forgive. So he says, take some of my ability to forgive, part of my ability to reconcile, part of my ability to love, and get that into the equation and see if you can have a little bit more fun. Bring part of my life, my ability, my compassion into your formulas, into your world, into your pressure cookers, and it will start relieving the pressure without having it build up somewhere else. So that's the kind of reconciling that God wants to bring into our little troubled worlds and our problems. Not just solving a problem with whatever we have to solve the problems with. He says, add a little divinity, take some of that pressure out of the equation, bring some compassion and mercy into the equation, and with that relief of that pressure, now you can come up with more easy, graceful solutions. Well, that's better. I thought we were in a lot of trouble. We're in a lot of trouble, but we got a lot more help. We got a little bit of divinity sneaking in. Let's see what kind of card we got coming up our sleeve. Oh, we've got some pretty good cards here. Jesus is giving us some extra cards. Not part of the human family. Oh, here's an ace of hearts. Here's a king of hearts. Here's a queen. Look at all these good cards. These are extra. Jesus is giving us the extra cards to play our game with. I can't forgive. They can't forgive. We just can't stop. We got all this. We just can't come to a solution. There's not enough things. Everybody is loaded. Everybody's tired. Everybody's frustrated. And then Jesus says, excuse me. Let me into the game. We can mess around a little bit here with these equations. I can add more mercy, undeserved love. You don't deserve it and you don't deserve it, but Jesus says, I got a little extra mercy. I got a little extra undeserved love. Yeah, but he doesn't deserve it, I know, and neither do you, but I'm going to give you a little and you a little and spread it around, gang. That should help. So that's the reconciliation of Christ, and Christ wants to get into our problem-solving scenarios. Christ is our peace. The gospel message always begins with a greeting of peace, and peace at all times crowns and confirms the relations between the disciples. I'll read the first part again, since this is a big one. He reconciled the world to himself. Christ reconciled the world to himself. All the conflicts we got, he already got them. He sucked them up, died with it. Then we says, hey, Jesus, you got the answers. I think we need a little bit more of your input here. He says, I was waiting for you to ask. Thank you very much. I love to be part of the trouble. Yes. This principle, drawn from the gospel, reminds us that Christ has made all things one in himself, heaven and earth, God and man, time and eternity, flesh and spirit, person and society. The sign of this unity and reconciliation. Reconciling means they all got to add up. How can you have this person and this person fighting? How can you get them all reconciled? You can't. We got this big messes and we can't pull it together. Humpty Dumpty is broken and we can't pull them together. Yeah, we're running out of time. Yeah, you can't Christ has reconciled all those things in himself. And he says, with my having reconciled that, I can take the pressure and then let's work it through from what I've already reconciled. The sign of this unity and reconciliation of all things in him is peace. Christ is our peace. The gospel message always brings with a greeting of peace, and peace at all times crowns and confirms the relations between the disciples. We'll probably pick up on this one some more, but let's roll to see what else we got. Peace is possible because the Lord has overcome the world and its constant conflict by making peace through the blood of his cross. Colossians 1:20. There's a little summary prayer, Colossians 15-20, which gives it a big picture deal. So big picture story, Colossians 15-20. He's reconciled all this, And so this is the end of it. But if we look more closely at these biblical texts, we find that the locus of this reconciliation of differences is within ourselves, in our own lives, ever threatened as they are by fragmentation and breakdown. If hearts are shattered in thousands of pieces, it is not easy to create authentic peace in society. Keep reading. The message of peace is not about a negotiated settlement, but rather the conviction that the unity brought by the Spirit can harmonize every diversity. It overcomes every conflict by creating a new and promising synthesis. Diversity is a beautiful thing when it can constantly enter into a process of reconciliation and seal a sort of cultural covenant resulting in a reconciled diversity. So this peace is not about a negotiated settlement, but rather a conviction that the unity is brought by the Spirit. A unity brought by the Spirit can harmonize every diversity. So what he's saying is we need to bring a spiritual well-being into the situation. What people are fighting about is basically they want happiness. They assume, we all always get very reductionistic and we assume happiness is about material, physical well-being. So we eliminate the rest of humanity, the rest of values, and we get it to what are we fighting over, what are the things we're fighting over, what are the things we're in competition about. And then we turn people into some of those things we fight about. We're fighting over our kid. We're fighting over the boyfriend. We're fighting over the people have become things, but that's part of what we fight about. The Pope is saying, if we've cheapened human nature into what bunch of things we've got, so we're just territorial animals fighting over things and people become part of those things, he says, we're not really going to get anywhere. Spirit is relationality. Spirit is where we get a sense of blessedness. Spirit is where we get a sense of happiness. I don't care how big your 400,000 square foot house is, you got one little bed to sleep in at night. And if you don't have a good night's sleep, you're not happy. It doesn't matter how big the rest of your house is. It's the Spirit which is what we're longing for, which is where we get our sense of happiness. But then we don't want to look at that. We always want to look at what we can look at, and we fight over all of our things. But the human person has a relational basis to it. Our spirit is relational. The relationality is where we get our sense of our joy and our peace and our happiness. We convince ourselves that that is not it. We don't want to identify ourselves as human lovers. People say, well, we're not human doers, we're human beings, but we're not just human beings, we're human lovers. We are not happy unless we are loving. Just being is not going to make us happy. He says, we're human doers, we're always do, and that's going to make us prosperous and work. He says, okay, no, we're supposed to meant to be, just be. It's not enough to just be, to just exist. We are not human existences. We're not just human beings, just to be in a static zone, forever existing, and call that living. For a human to be alive means we must be loving. Our basic modality is relational. Relational is love. And if we are not in the process of love, we are not happy. Love is a spiritual reality. It's relationships between persons is what spirit is. Relations between persons. And when those relations are marked by love, by self-giving, by trust, a place of trust between persons. Not giving and taking. It's not a give and take. That's a bartered relationships. Love is not a give and a take. Those kind of relationships, people have those kind of, what am I getting out of it? Are you giving? What am I giving? Is the giving making the taking? That's a commercial venture. That's not love. If our relationships, if our personal relationships are based on give and take, it's a commercial venture. You know what they call a commercial venture in the area of love? Prostitution. That's generally not a good thing. But that's where we go. Love does not measure. It doesn't measure what am I getting, what am I taking. And if we've reduced our love, our relationality, who we are as human lovers, we're not going to be happy. And how are you going to negotiate yourself out of conflict if you never get to the place where you're actually talking about what really makes you happy? We're negotiating over the things, and what really makes us happy is to get down to our dimension of the love factor. And if we're moving the love factor, it's going to be much easier to negotiate the rest of the conflict. But if you're not bringing love, spirit into the equation, you're never going to end up with happy campers. You get people who negotiate and got all the, whatever they're fighting over, Dodger Stadium or the Clippers, they'll have those fights and negotiations, and someone will get a pile of money and a pile of property, but will it be the love and that blessedness and that deep joy that we're actually longing for? And we can go from this factor and start with that spirit, start with that love, and then it's going to be much easier to resolve the rest of whatever resolving if we get to the main part of the equation that humans are really longing for. Our human spirit, our human soul is longing to be in love. And love is not, once again, a give and take, and you give me this and you give me that. Is not, in fact, love. We call that love, but that's another kind of restricted relationship where we're controlling each other and we're getting and giving, but that's not true love. True love does not measure. It doesn't say, I give you this. It's an offering and it's a receiving. An offering and a receiving. Offering does not guarantee that I'm going to get any back. Receiving does not mean that I can grab it and hold it and possess it. You receive it. If it happens to be there, fine. If it's not there, I can't do anything about it. I don't grab it. It's an offering, free, and a receiving. And in between, there is no control. There's no guarantees. There's no guarantee of reciprocity. There's no guarantee. It's a trust. It's a risk. And if I'm doing it to get something back, it is not love. So you can see, as humans, we've gotten a little bit away from what actually makes us happy. And as humans, we're so scared, so afraid, so negotiated, and you can feel what it's like to be a human in our culture. It's a dead culture, fighting over dead things, and we've sold our sense of blessedness, our sense of love, our sense of well-being, and we cheapened ourselves, and now we're bartering and bargaining and fighting and conflicting over things that are not going to make us happy anyway. And yet we can't give up the fight because we're so convinced that this is what's going to make us happy. We have to keep negotiating and keep moving in that scarcity, in those zones, and because we're acting in that anxiety, we're stimulating other people in their anxiety, and we got everybody anxiously trying to work our way into a place of blessedness, peace, and love. And nothing of what we're dealing with is part of the solution. The solution is to operate with love and calm in the first place. You can't negotiate and get love. You start off with love. And with love in the formula, then you can negotiate your way out of conflict. But if you're not starting with some love and some sense of unity and well-being, you're not really going to negotiate your way out of conflict. Because you have a conflict, and if you're empty and you're frustrated and all you've done is move stuff, people are not going to be happy, and they're going to look for something else that's just going to make them happy, which is going to put them into a position to grab something else of somebody else's, and you're going to have to renegotiate your conflicts again. Because you have an empty person, a longing person, a lonely person, trying to get happy, not getting happy the way that it's going to make them happy, which is by loving. They're going to try and get something to get happy. That's going to make them frustrated. It's going to put them into another conflict situation. Then they're going to resolve that conflict situation out of more anxiety and more emptiness, and do you think it's going to make them more happy? No, they'll get more properties, they'll get more stuff, and they'll get more spatial conquering. And then we move on in increasingly empty castles of what we've acquired. Other people have emptinesses of resources that we're using in order to fill up our happiness, and then we've got a big conflicting situation. Instead of starting it with a little bit of relationship, a little bit of love, and using that love and spirit to bring into our formulas, then with that love and spirit, to then resolve some of our conflicts. The message of peace is not about a negotiated settlement, but rather the conviction that the unity brought by the Spirit can harmonize every diversity. It overcomes every conflict by creating a new and promising synthesis, love. Diversity is a beautiful thing when it can constantly enter into a process of reconciliation and seal a sort of cultural conflict, resulting in a reconciled diversity. We'll move along. As the bishops of the Congo have put it, now don't go beating drums and start dancing around. Come on now. As the bishops of the Congo have put it, our ethnic diversity is our wealth. It is only in unity, through conversion of hearts and reconciliation, that we will be able to help our country to develop on all levels. This sense of a deep unity and the conversion of our hearts, which means that spirit starts entering into how we are with each other, then we will have that calm. We can see and sense what it's like for the person to be going through what they're going through, because we have a sense of spirit. We're not so cheap and afraid that we can only worry about our point of view. We have that sense of unity, spirit, well-being. We can look and we can view, and then we can say, you know, I'm not going to be really happy unless these people have their spirit, have a little sense of love. I really want them to feel an experience of love. Not just that they can get what they want out of the negotiation. I really want them to be happy, to be able to be in a place where they can share love. And if they don't have their basic resources, they don't have some basic things, I want them to have what it takes so that they can live in a loving kind of a way. Because I'm not going to be happy unless they're happy. My happiness comes from a sense of love. Love wants the well-being of another. I can't be truly happy if I'm selfish. love is going to want the well-being of another. If I want to be happy, my negotiation has to include them having the spiritual well-being. I want some spiritual well-being for them. So to truly negotiate for my own self-interest, my greatest self-interest is for me to be a loving being. To be a loving being, I need to be concerned about them in a loving way, for them to be prosperous. So my best self-interest is to look out for their self-interest to make sure that they're experiencing and growing in love. So loving self-interest, if I really want to be happy, knowing what makes me happy is that spiritual vitality, that loving presence, that can only happen if I operate in that loving principle. When I operate in that principle, I start getting happy. We're generating generosity. I start getting happy. And I'm doing that because somehow I am connected. I know that we share a unity. And they're getting happy because they feel respected, their dignity, and somehow now we got on the same spirit. We're sharing love. Even without all the tangible things getting worked out, then with that common love, then we can work on the particulars of the historical scarcity of resources, whatever else we're managing together. But we're doing it with a spirit of love, such a deal. And along the way, we've already gotten some of the joy and some of the happiness while we're still on the way of coming up with comprehensive designs that we can move forward to and then come to a new resting place to start again with other insights to move forward and to move forward and move forward. But our mode of moving forward is always this spiritual principle with this viability of a little bit of love being our mode of operandi. Okay. Yes. As much as I love these Bible studies, or whatever they are, I love them even more when they're over. Okay, now we have a little study groups. So find a couple people in your study group, and their first question is, find a couple people to fight with. The first question is, do I think it's more important to solve the problem efficiently or to have a little oil of kindness and love in the process of solving the problem? Or to have a little oil of kindness and oil, O-I-L, oil. Like if you have an engine but you do not have any oil in it, guess what's going to happen to your engine? You're going to have a mighty big mechanic bill. So you can efficiently just go about it, or you can go about it with a little bit of oil of kindness and love in the process. So you can have pure efficiency without any oil of kindness and spirit, or you can have a little oil of kindness and spirit in your process of addressing conflict. That's good. Let's say, do I think it's more important to solve the problem efficiently without oil? How about if we solve the problem efficiently without oil? Make it real clear here. Problem efficiently without oil. Or to have a little oil of kindness and love in the process.